superstar Matthew Meyer in a moment, but I want to start with this. With all that we now know the way college football is set up, with NIL the way it is, with the wide open transfer portal the way it is, even though they're trying to grab onto some of that, with who is who, if in fact you could pick one team, and maybe this wouldn't be the same team you would have picked 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and maybe it's still just your favorite team. Who right now in college athletics, based on everything combined, is the best college football team to play for in America?
It's probably still Alabama. I mean, they're in contention. They're winning still. They've got the greatest coach of all time in spite of everything. And in spite of what he says that, other teams can outspend them to the poorhouse, he says that, as a crimson waterfall cascades down behind him outside of his office. So I don't think that probably Alabama. I mean, they're going to put you, your best shot to get in the pros, all that. Yeah, I would say Bama.
Yeah, I mean, you spring this question on us, so we've given it no thought. Like, we haven't sat and stewed on this or anything like that. But, yeah, I mean, I'd default to Alabama. I'd say Georgia's right there in the mix now. Being the defending national champions, having what they've got going on. And obviously Kirby Smart's a great coach, so I think that they would be somebody that folks might consider. Clemson a couple years ago, but not so much right now. And outside of that, I mean, who's proven? Who's reliable year in and year out? Ohio State, you could say. But, yeah, I mean, ultimately throw Georgia, Ohio State in that mix. And maybe there's a couple of others that I'm not thinking of. But, I mean, pound for pound, yeah, give me Bama over everybody.
So then last week when you have Nick Saban saying what he said, which he was to his constituents, and even, again, the Jimbo reaction as well, coming off a number one class as far as recruiting in the last 2 or 3 years, and they've had other years when they were pretty good. Really all that was two egos, two guys who were trying to, turf war, protect their turf, gain some turf, and in the end, two that have pretty much everything they need bitching and moaning about recruiting.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it was. And it's something that we see, I mean, just in many walks of life in America, whether it be politics or business or whatever. And, those are the oil companies. Like, we have to do this or we'll be broke. Like, really? When nobody was driving, you had a record profit. So I don't know how that's possible. So it's all that. I mean, it's the way that we're sold things to try to make us believe that one thing is one way or the other. When if you just look at it factually, like, look, yeah, Jimbo Fisher is the coach of a perpetual 8-4 team that has now has an advantage that can maybe level the playing field for other programs of similar means and similar results. Like Texas A&M, they're not the only ones who are perpetually 8-4, and nobody can figure out why they haven't been better. But now they can level the playing field a little bit. Those that are going to get leveled don't like it that much and would like to tilt the scales back in their favor to whatever that may seem, however irrational or non-factual it might be.
Yeah, it is interesting, and in the end, really, Alabama's not going to suffer. They won't because they have so much. But, there have been other dynasties, and they don't always last forever. And you always wonder what can be the thing that eventually ends a dynasty. Could it be a coaching change? Could it be something else that occurs? It doesn't look like Alabama is going to go anywhere anytime soon because Saban doesn't appear he's going to leave. I saw somebody tweet the other day that this could be it. This could be what sends him into retirement.
Been doing that for years.
It's kind of like trying to say, for example, what was the name of the horse that won the Kentucky Derby? Just pick,
Rich Strike.
Yeah, pick that one every time. And once every 57 races or 35 years, you might be right and it makes you look pretty good.
Yeah, but there's so much stuff like that just thrown against the wall on social media. I mean, like how many people said, Baylor's getting the death penalty, just watch.
Yep.
So we watched and we watched and we watched. And it was a year and 2 years and 3 years and 4 years. Just wait. I mean, it's easy to say something when there's no repercussions to it. So, yeah, you see people just throw out, Saban must be at the end of his rope. Well, I mean, that would be logical just given how old he is. Like, at some point, yeah, he's going to have to retire because he's just not going to want to coach anymore or he won't be able to coach anymore. But I'm not looking into these comments and thinking that that's meaning anything along the lines of, oh, my gosh, Saban must be at his wit's end. And no, I mean, he's clearly still – thick in the game. He's calling on his donors to spend more money. That's all he's really doing ultimately. And I'm sure he's, obviously throwing some shade on A&M as well because he probably doesn't like finishing second. But, Jimbo and Saban both, they can make the points they want to make and then backtrack, in Saban's case or whatever. But we both know what they're doing. Like, that's what's so silly about it. People can run in circles talking about it, and it's fun and it's entertaining that we got that little exchange last week, and it will be something to look forward to here in a little less than 2 weeks with SEC Media Days. But I mean, we know the deal. Anybody who's not completely blinded by their school colors knows that both these guys are deep into NIL. They both, I would imagine, know exactly what their collectives are doing, even though they're not a part of it. And they know, what's being thrown around out there, and they're right in the thick of it because, when all is said and done, guess who's going to probably have 2 of the top 5, if not top 3 recruiting classes, if not the top 2 recruiting classes. So these two guys complaining, and they're sitting there with, these number 1, number 2 recruiting classes. I don't really feel sorry for them. And look, that's what you asked for. You wanted this money thrown around, and I'm glad for the athletes. It's a great thing for them. But, it was ultimately going to lead to something else. And what that led to was, all of a sudden, Alabama's got a little bit more competition because suddenly – it's not just about the wins or about this or that. It's, hey, people can openly spend money, and it just so happens that one of those teams that's trying to catch them has a whole heck of a lot of it, and they're willing to spend it.
Yeah, to me, it sounded like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos
arguing over screw both of y'all. I don't mean,
arguing over whose business practices are better.
Exactly.
To me, if anything, it shows that Saban is far from being finished because he's also trying to set up again what he needs from his base as he moves forward with the dominant type of run that he's had since he was at Alabama, and, of course, the national title at LSU. Jeff Grimm, Alabama fan. Saban is just warning about what is happening like he did with the hurry-up offense. I saw that argument last week as well. The transfer portal, if these teams keep using NIL, Bama will pay within 18 months. We said that. We actually did bring that up, that this could be just him. Okay, this is how we're going to play the game. And again, then there's also the accusations. Alabama's been playing this game for the last 25 or 30 years, or like A&M has been as well.
All he had to do was stop before he pointed the finger at anybody. Yeah. And he'd have been fine.
Admitted that.
He'd have been fine. Like,
if he just doesn't say A&M paid for their entire recruiting class, this is not that big of a deal. But he chose to single them out and single Deion and Jackson State out. And that was his choice, and clearly he walked it back once he got the backlash. I mean, again, my whole thing with that was just I was surprised that he was just saying that on camera and not realizing how that would probably get some backlash, but I'm sure he's well aware now, and we won't see any videos unless he intends for them to be shown of a mistake, if that was all that much of a mistake out there.
And it's strangely ironic because at some point this summer, Nick Saban is going to have all of the new people in the room, all the transfers, all of his old players, sometime in June, whenever they have their first day, and he's going to have a meeting, and one of the things that's going to come up is going out at night. And until then, he was going to say, hey, guys, remember you're always on camera. Everybody's got a phone. Everybody's a reporter now. Don't do anything that's going to embarrass yourself. And there's a time that now we can point to where he forgot his own advice.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Michael DeHart, SEC and Bama. That's the target.
Yeah, I mean, that's the top dog. I mean, you can't, again, if Clemson had maintained what they had been doing, the last couple years, they were still like right there knocking on the national championship door. They would certainly be, a team that you could argue. But, I mean, Bama's been doing it for so long. They've been so consistent, stacked so many titles, so many first-round, on and on and on, more Heisman than ever before. So, yeah, I mean, they're the kings until they're not anymore. So it is kind of funny to hear the king, of the top school out there being the one that's complaining so much. And, it does make me wonder, too, because I do think he's very smart and intentional with what he was saying. And I do, again, think he was asking boosters basically to open up their purse strings even further than they already have. But I do wonder what part of what he has said in terms of the criticism and the way the college game is changing are really his thoughts and not his thoughts simply because that's what's best for Bama. But which are his thoughts that are best for Bama, and which are his thoughts that are just on the grand scheme of college football? Because he's obviously coming from a different perspective. He doesn't have to worry about the NIL stuff as much as, even if it's a pain in the ass, it's not as much as it is for a Baylor or a Texas Tech or really anybody outside of about 15 or 20 schools. Yep. I'm sure it's an annoyance, But when he does talk about NIL and he talks about the transfer portal and all these other issues, I wonder how much of that, just Nick Saban, not Alabama head coach Nick Saban, but dude who's been around college football for a long time, Nick Saban, forget recruiting pitches and all that. What do you really feel is the issues are the issues right now? I would love to hear that, and I'm sure we have heard some of that. It's just hard to
same thing.
It's hard to distinguish, between what's best for him and what's best for college football.
S. Michael DeHart, two of the wealthiest programs trying to act like they're homeless.
Yeah, it is.
In some ways,
that's it. And you see that all over the place all the time. But I do think, one of the things he's made before this was the equality of everything, where scholarships are equal, Title IX is equal, everything in college athletics is equal, that, he wants everybody on the team to make at least the same base amount. I think that makes sense.
Okay, but if that's the case, Alabama has more that way than most everyone else. They have more that way even with the NIL. If everything's equal, then everyone has to have the same type of locker rooms or the same type of stadium facilities. Maybe not the amount, because some schools and bases are bigger than others.
And the way they have that in professional sports is there's revenue sharing.
Exactly.
There's
which
overall
I think,
equal revenue sharing.
I know this might get just bullet holes from everybody. I still wonder that in the end, and there is revenue sharing when it comes to the college football playoff. There is revenue sharing in a way when it comes to the NCAA men's basketball tournament. I think the only way this whole thing stays together, would you not think, might be some sort of plan that, yes, the rich can still make a lot more, but some sort of revenue sharing that does make sure the others aren't completely left in the dust.
No.
Okay.
You know why? Because who's going to do that? Who's going to willingly do that? You think Texas is really wanting to give handouts? You think Alabama's really wanting to give handouts just so that, some schools they don't give two S's about are good or are closer to their level? I don't think that I think it's dog eat dog, every man for themselves. And, in some ways you are seeing people have to team up, the Pac-12 and the Big Ten, so they have a voting block or whatever. And you see the Big 12 schools that had to scramble and stay together to have a conference, quite frankly. But even then you were seeing, Kansas in the Big Ten or Oklahoma State to the Pac-12. And granted, that's fans talking, but that's probably some of the scuttlebutt behind the scenes with donors as well. Like, hey, whatever's best for us, everybody's got to look out for themselves. And that kind of sucks. But that's also the way that it is. So no, I don't think for one second that the SEC is going to want to share money so that the Big 12 can survive.
You're right. I do think that there is a point where when all hell broke loose with Texas and Oklahoma SEC, the other 8 teams kind of looked at each other, man, we got to stay together. And yet every one of them most likely were making their own phone calls, as I can understand. Hey, how can we get hooked up here and there? And then eventually all of them looked around, no matter what fan base from any of the 8 remaining schools said, thought, or were told, the best for all of them was to make sure they stabilized the Big 12, and they